It's 1 o'clock somewhere and shortly we'll be here. Sally is taking the roll call as we speak. And the first order of business is declaration of interests. They were to be provided written. However, if you do have any pecuniary interests, you can bring them up now or at any time during the meeting. Okay, so the adoption of the agenda. Everybody's had an opportunity to review the agenda and the very large package that came out. So if I could ask for someone to move the agenda. Okay, Dina and Roy has seconded. All in favor of the agenda? Carried. The second item is the approval of the minutes of the Board of Directors meeting of September 9th, 2024, page 3. They were provided in your package as well. Is there any questions about that? Okay, seeing none, I'd ask for someone to move the agenda or move the minutes, please. Okay, moved by Glenn, seconded by Jeff. All in favor? It is carried. The second item is the employee presentation, a review of the stewardship program and objectives. Marissa and Kaylee. I'm sorry, ladies.
Oh, no. Okay.
We have to interrupt you here with a very brief meeting for the source protection meeting. Okay. And that's, so again, Sally has done the roll call for this. If there's a declaration of interest concerning the source protection information, can do so now or at any time during the next 4.5 minutes. So the adoption of the source water protection agenda. Jeff and Glenn, all in favor? It's carried. The main business for there is the approval of the minutes of Source Water Protection Authority minutes of April 8th, 2024, which was provided. Could I get someone, any questions about what's going on with source protection? Yes, Janet.
It's just if you read the minutes, it said that the minutes for December, which were not included and should have been in the April meeting, were also not, and were meant to be included in this meeting, were not included in this meeting package. So we're still missing the December meeting minutes and they have not been approved. So I just wanted to make that point. So they will have to be showing up at the next source protection meeting to be approved.
Okay. So Marika, you got that? Okay. All right. So we need the approvals of the amendments as amended. Richard.
Read this a while ago, but it looked like they were investigating, strengthening the rules around road salt and different things. Is this, did I read that right? Like how is that being done?
Marika, can you comment?
Thank you for your question. So that is true. The application of road salt is now a significant drinking water threat for all of our municipalities that have vulnerable areas that bisect their municipal boundaries. So that means 13 municipalities now are required to have salt management plans, whereas previously, I believe only 4 of the municipalities were required to have salt management plans. So when the source protection plan gets revised and approved by the minister, municipalities have a year to establish a salt management plan, which will include best management practices in the salt industry. It might include things like reducing salt quantity. It might reduce having emergency plans in case road salt gets spilt. So we'll be working with municipalities on establishing those. And additionally, salt application for industrial, commercial, institutional properties are a threat in certain areas around municipal drinking water areas. So we'll have to work with businesses individually to make sure that they have something called a risk management plan to mitigate impacts of salt application on their properties. So Certainly, there has been some additional considerations, but none of these changes will be in effect until the source protection plan has been revised and approved by the minister, which we anticipate will happen sometime in 2025.
So is there public consultation in that? And you said that 13 municipalities, it's become a risk. Did they know it was a risk, or who decided it was a risk?
So that's a great question. So the technical rules have been updated. They were updated in 2021. And so we've been working with our municipalities since then to inform them that when we revised the mapping and the technical rules were revised by the province, that they are now subject to these additional policy requirements. They were notified in pre-consultation. So this is a specific step in the consultation process required under the Clean Water Act. They were notified in July of this year. Notices were sent out to staff and they were given the opportunity to provide comments. And then we were also providing a second opportunity to provide comments right now because we are in public consultation. So in addition to the public, anybody who's required to implement our policies and our municipal partners all have another opportunity to let us know if these policy implications, if they have any feedback for us. So far, our municipalities have been on board about the additional salt requirements and the policies that are now going to be in effect in their municipality.
Anything further on that, Richard?
So I guess to answer my question, the province upped the rules, and so no municipality was at risk. The province changed the rules.
Yes, the province did change the rules in terms of how we determine salt application and storage to be a significant threat. It was changed from, for example, it was a certain amount of tons of salt, and now it's as little as 10 kg of salt being stored. So it has increased the amount of significant drinking water threats drastically across the province. And we had to develop policies or revise policies in response to this change.
Okay, thank you for that. That was very interesting. I have to admit, I did not think of the salt application as being anything, but then I don't think we're part of the source water protection, but maybe we are for Smith Falls area, not sure. The second point that we have, so that's the minutes, and so we've got that, the minutes as amended, and so could we move that they be approved? Jeff, you sticking your hand up? Good for you, Jeff. And Dina, you're sticking your hand up. So all in favor, they be approved as amended? Okay. And the next is the Source Protection Committee member appointment. Marika, you're going to speak to this?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I can direct everyone's attention to page 7 of your agenda package. Our Source Protection Committee has a vacancy following the retirement of Chief Randy Malcolm. Chief Malcolm occupied the seat that was designated for First Nation representation. He held this seat for 17 years, but he announced his retirement in the spring. Staff reached out to the Algonquins of Ontario, advising them that we would like them to select a new representative to be appointed to our committee. In late September, a decision was made and they selected Sandra Bickle to join our committee. Sandra is currently working and volunteering with the Shnamakoba Algonquin First Nation, and she's worked alongside Chief Randy Malcolm for years as a community liaison. When needed, she is also an Algonquin negotiation representative, working to support the land claim process and sharing her knowledge of Algonquin heritage and traditions. Her former career was in health and safety for over 20 years. After meeting with the Source Protection Authority, Source Protection staff will prepare a letter of appointment and complete orientation with Sandra before our next Source Protection Committee meeting, which is scheduled in December. Thank you very much.
Okay, any questions concerning that? Nope. Okay, that's basically it for source water protection. We'll be looking forward to that appointment coming forward. Will we be approving that appointment or?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Okay, so that'll be in December. Oh. It's not in the package. Okay. So Marika, are we in a position to actually appoint her right now?
Yes, there's a recommendation in the agenda package.
Okay,
And that gives us the ability to proceed with reaching out to the Rideau Valley Source Protection Authority. Following that, then that gives us direction to issue a letter of appointment on behalf of the Mississippi Rideau Source Protection Region, and we'll share that with Sandra.
okay. So the motion is that the Mississippi Valley Source Protection Authority officially appoints Sandra Bicknell to the Mississippi Rideau Source Protection Committee for a 5-year term to represent the public sector. Could I have someone move that motion? Roy is moving it. Second is Bev. Okay. Any other discussions? All in favor? It is carried. Okay. And then finally, we're at a motion for adjournment of the source water protection meeting, moved by Mary Lou, seconded by Dina. All in favor? Carried. And I apologize to the board and committee. The next time this is going to go a bit smoother. We need to straighten out our motions and stuff. I didn't have them in front of me. Thank you. Okay, returning to where we were, we have the review of the stewardship program and objective. Thank you now, ladies, and thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Awesome. Okay, thank you guys. Thank you everyone for having me today. I know you have quite a full package today, so I'll try to keep this as brief as possible. We just wanted to give you guys a review of our 2024 year. So a little bit of background. I'm sure most of you are aware of this, but with OREG 68721, all municipalities are required to sign bilateral agreements in order to keep all Category 3 programming, including stewardship. I'm very grateful that all 11 municipalities agreed to this and signed agreements allowing our program to be extended for 5 years. So this year, one of the really exciting things to come out was our expansion of Alice Lanark into Alice, Mississippi Rideau. So after a lot of discussions with our committee and Alice National, we are now covering both the Mississippi and the Rideau Valley watershed. So any farmer interested in either watershed can participate. And with that, we have kept the section of Lanark County that's not in either municipality or watershed as well. So this year, we were able to do a total of 17 projects on 12 properties. 6 of those properties were in our watershed, so we're split right down the middle this year. We were able to complete 7 projects. So you'll see these 2 lovely wetlands here. Those were 2 of our creation projects, 2 of the 3. In addition, we did 3 large-scale tree plantings for over 11,000 trees and 1 tall grass prairie creation of 1.5 acres. Our Ottawa Rural Clean Water Program continues to have really steady to a slight increase in uptake. This is pretty standard across all 3 CAs the past few years. We have approved 15 projects to date in 2024 and have 3 additional projects awaiting processing and approval. Of note, too, you'll see at the bottom, we did reapprove a wetland project that wasn't able to be done in 2023, and it was able to be completed just a couple weeks ago, actually. So we've done 4 wetland projects in total across the watershed this year. Moving on to our shoreline program, we have done a total of, let's see, quick math, 2,100 native plants on our shorelines. This is through both of our planting programs where Kayla and I and whatever other staff we can wrangle go out and plant on private properties ourselves, and our Lake Tree Day programs, which this year we did in partnership with Cache and Sunday Lakes. The big number here, the 100,000 trees were planted in partnership with Rideau Valley. They deliver their private land forestry and Green Acres program on our behalf, and we're able to plant this many trees on 29 properties just in our watershed, which is a very high number. Okay, finally, the other great thing we were able to do this year was hire Kayla for a 9-month contract as our intern. She really allowed us to focus on some additional community engagement and outreach. So she's just going to quickly touch on some highlights from this year on that. Kayla?
Thank you. So this year, our City Stream Watch program actually showed a really good uptake in interest. So we had about 20 volunteers out. We did around 6 kilometers between Feed Mill and Pool Creeks. And then from last year's City Stream Watch, we were able to locate a section of Watts Creek that showed need of assistance, we'll say. So we were able to, through funding from the Invasive Species Center, so we had the Invasive Species Action Fund. So we were able to have 5 volunteers out that day. We removed 17 bags of invasive species from a section. And then through TD Tree Days, with more funding, we were able to have 25 volunteers out, and we replanted that section with 125 trees and shrubs.
Back to Marissa. Yeah, thank you. And then in addition, we had our Unsmoke grant this year, which we were able to remove about 500 pounds of litter from the Mississippi River and Pool Creek. Oh, and we attended a lot of outreach events. I was just at one on Saturday, and it was a very beautiful day. Okay, so to wrap up, looking into 2025 and beyond, one of our big goals of stewardship is to keep this as financially sustainable of a program as possible. So we're consistently looking for long-term funding for our ongoing programming, as well as the short-term grants that Kayla was just mentioning for our kind of one-off habitat enhancement projects and community engagement. We also try to partner where possible with other CAs, municipalities, lake associations, and other stewardship programs to really build, strengthen our relationships and partner where we can. For concrete numbers, we do have a lot of uptake already going into next year. A couple of Alice, Mississippi Rito projects have shown interest already, and we're continuing to do site visits into 2025. We have a few shoreline plantings planned for spring. Again, we're still doing site visits into next year. We will be sampling Cody Creek for our City Stream Watch program. This is the only creek we will be doing. It's like 40 kilometers. It's quite large. So we're going to just stick with that one for next year. And we will confirm our Lake Tree Date partners over the winter. We're just wrapping up our field season, and then we'll start planning a little more for the new year. Awesome. Any questions, comments?
Questions, anyone? Well, that's one. Pool Creek, near and dear to my heart because we were involved in it before all the houses went in. How is it holding up? Because it was a cold water creek and coming down through, and they were hoping to get trout reestablished, and there was all these good things that were going to happen in and around the development. And I know going through and seeing, for lack of better words, grocery carts and stuff in the middle of the water just didn't really appeal to me. So is it holding up or not?
Yep, in some ways. So we have still seen indicators that it is still a cold water creek. We are in the process of analyzing our temperature loggers, which Kelly Stiles put in this year, and our City Stream Watch results. So we will be doing a report on that at the end of the year to keep an eye out for. But I will say that 400 pounds of garbage, most of it came from Pool Creek. We removed back seats of vans. We removed huge construction debris, doors, a big number of things, all just along Sweetnam Drive.
Alan, you had a question?
You mentioned shopping carts. I know most of the grocers have some sort of reward program for that because they run anywhere from $500 to $700 each. So might help funding the program if you're getting that much shopping carts in your water.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Awesome.
Report received for information.
Stop sharing. Thank you.
Okay, our next report is from Jennifer with the watershed update, which will tell us what's happening now that we're in drought conditions after being drowned all summer.
Should be on the desktop, so if we close this one.
There it goes. There you go.
And then you share your screen.
Thanks. Perfect. Good afternoon. We have been seeing a very interesting year in the watershed this year. Just to recap, we started out last year fairly dry, going into January with literally no snowpack. And then we saw virtually no precip in February, causing more concern about having enough water to maintain the system going into the spring. We saw the earliest spring peak ever recorded in our watershed. Mississippi River peaked almost 1 month earlier than normal, and it was extremely low peak. So our main management concern at the time was being able to fill the lakes to their summer target levels. And then the rain hit. As you can see, we saw double the amount of rain we would normally see for April and June. We saw storms from 2 hurricanes hit the watershed, Hurricane Beryl on July 10th and Hurricane Debbie on August 9th. And to put in perspective how wet this year has been, a normal yearly total amount of precip we see in the Mississippi Valley watershed is around 900 millimeters per year. As of to date, we have received over 1,120 millimeters so far, and we still have a few months left to go. So lots of rain. So we've been dealing with conditions that we wouldn't normally be dealing with this year. As you can see on this graph, the dark blue is what we wouldn't see in a normal year. So we would see a large peak around mid-April for a spring peak, and then followed by minimal flows throughout the summer months. This year, we sent out water conditions, water safety bulletins in February, March, April, June, July, and August. So those were sent out dealing with unsafe conditions and higher than normal flows. After the early and low peak in the spring, we received enough rain in April and May to fill the lakes and bring flows up for a second peak. So if you look at the red, you can see we had that early peak, and then we had another similar peak later on, right around the same time. And then it continued to rain into June. It didn't take long for the upper lakes were full and started to spill water, bringing more water downstream into Dalhousie and Mississippi Lake. Now, we were able to store a lot of that excess water in Crotch Lake at the time, reducing the downstream peak. We were able to pass all the excess water and get the levels back down in the upper lake so that we could start putting logs back in, reducing flows and bringing the levels back down in the lower end of the watershed. Again, we received more significant rain with the rain from Hurricane Beryl, and before the upper lakes. Sorry, but this time it was different. We didn't have the storage available in the upper watershed. So Crotch Lake was full, and it wasn't long before the upper lakes were spilling water again. Eventually Crotch Lake started spilling over the weir, which caused Dalhousie Lake and Mississippi Lake to kind of come up again. We saw another significant peak in July. We were able to get flows under control before Hurricane Debbie hit, and thankfully it hit more of the east end of the watershed and didn't impact much on the main system. So here's a graph of the Carp River at Kimburn. For this year, you can see similar spring peaks in the red for early March and May, or sorry, mid-April. But you can see the difference in the flashy runoff peaks from the different storms throughout the summer. And of course, Hurricane Debbie was more of an impact in this area due to the amounts of rain received. All in all, even though we've had an abnormal year, when it comes to rainfall in our system, it did do well and functioned the way it's supposed to limit flooding impacts. So here's the fall drawdown for this year that we follow every year and where we're currently sitting at each lake. Drawdowns on the most upper lakes are underway. Water levels are expected to drop as they typically would over the next 2 months. The drawdown on Mazenal Lake will start as normal in early November to account for boat traffic during hunting season. Levels until then will be stabilized at normal historical levels. And all the dams will be operated through the fall and winter to try and maintain within normal operating rule curves and for each of the structures. Any questions?
Any questions for Jennifer? Okay. Just a sidebar comment. I'm not surprised that Hurricane Beryl hit on July 10th because my sister's birthday is July 10th and her name is Beryl.
There you go.
Okay. Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, we're now going into the GM update. And Sally?
Okay, I'm just going to touch on a couple of items here. The first one is the KMP Trail. So we did get the latest version of offer of agreement and sale from the county, and I think we're getting very close. Attached to the agreement is a lease agreement that would apply to the KMP while we resolve land ownership issues along the length of the trail. The interesting thing is that under our new legislation, this triggers a need for a ministerial approval. Any lease agreements exceeding 5 years in duration have to be approved by the minister. So it means that I'll just need to sort out that approval process and make sure that we're ticking all the boxes, that the day that the board's ready to sign that agreement, that we have the minister's pre-approval to do so. Another thing I wanted to highlight is that we just renewed a license of occupancy for a 10-year period for Morris Island with the City of Ottawa. A license of occupancy is different from a lease in legislation. A lease can be tied to, as I understand it, an agreement of purchase and sale, whereas a license of occupancy doesn't have that same sort of registration on title. So we were able to execute that 10-year renewal on Morris Island without that requirement. Another thing I wanted to flag, because it potentially affects all of you as well, is that you may or may not be aware that Microsoft is discontinuing support of its Windows 10 operating system, which many of your municipal computers likely operate on. During COVID, when we had to mobilize a lot of people off-site, we had to invest in a lot of hardware at that time. And so a lot of MVCA's hardware is not affected by this, but we do have some hardware, 12 desktops, 2 laptops that will have to be changed out this coming year, which we're going to manage within our annual IT budget. We'll just push off other things to accommodate this. But I just wanted to flag this for you because it could have implications for some of your municipalities as well. So that's all that I really wanted to take the time to highlight today, just because we have a very full agenda. So I'm happy to answer any other questions regarding the GM update.
Any questions for Sally? Mary Lou?
Just one question about the significance of this new regulation on leases. It seems that 5 years is too short a time to realize any sort of significant project or progress on a project. Will we then have to go this route of license of occupancy? for anything that might get developed?
So the regulation pertains, so when they passed Ontario Regulation 686, which is what a lot of the documents you're looking at today fall under, it was very land focused. You may recall conservation authorities, we had to look at all of our land holdings, whether or not they were developable, how we were using them, develop policies around acquisition and disposal of them. And so this falls under that umbrella. It's the province wanting to make sure that CAs are managing their land assets appropriately. And they have drawn this line in the sand of 5-year leases. Anything beyond a 5-year lease, the province wants a kick at the can, I suppose, to determine whether or not they feel that that lease agreement is in the public interest. So I can't comment on a provincial, 5-year threshold, but you're correct in that as it relates to the KNP, well, the county may wish to obviously do improvements and enhancements. And this is where I need to sort out, are there any limitations on that under this ministerial approval?
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Richard.
I guess it just, so that lease is either way, they have to approve it? If we were leasing land, it'd be the same thing? Or we're not sure that that's what it, but it's either way, is it?
The regulation, whether or not the county was offering to buy it, the lease agreement portion is what's subject to the regulation for requiring ministerial approval.
No,
So
but-
if, for instance, on Morris Island, it was a lease agreement with the city as opposed to a license of occupancy, then absolutely we'd be having to go through the minister for that, even though that CA has been in place, since the 80s.
No, my question is, if we're leasing or somebody's leasing from us, either way, it has to be approved.
I believe it's yes, I believe you're correct. Whether we're leasing, no, I believe you're right. I'm just reflecting on what the legislation says. And I believe you're right. Whether we're leasing from somebody or somebody's leasing from us, any lease agreements that are obligating a property that we have an interest in. But I can check on that just to make sure.
Okay. Anything else? No? Okay, thank you, Sally, for that. The next two items, number 5 and 6 on your agenda, are in camera. And I would ask that we're going to move into camera. I'll read the resolution. And they would ask that Joan Glacier also remain. Joan is been working with Sally on this. So the committee moved in-camera session for discussion of the following matters: labor relations or employee negotiations. Could I have that moved? Moved by Mary Lou, seconded by Janet. All in favor? Carried. I apologize, people, if I'm missing you on the thing. I looked down the rows first. I will try and look up there. So we're good. Are you going to do that presentation for her? As you mentioned. Okay, so our next item is item 7. Okay. Okay, so be it resolved, this is rising from our discussion that the Board of Directors approve the change in job ratings as recommended, and resolve that the Board of Directors appoint the Executive Committee to review management compensation. Jeff moves, Janet seconds, all in favor. Okay. And just an update, the Executive Committee is meeting on the 25th, which is Friday of this week with the consultant. So. Okay, the budget. Okay, we have Stacy back. But Janet's going to lead our discussion. Stacy is feeling rather ill, so hopefully she'll be better and we'll see her at our next meeting.
Okay, thank you. So, MVCA follows a pretty standard process in terms of budget development. It starts either last month or this month, but it begins in part with us getting budget direction from the board, which typically we take following the City of Ottawa staff receiving their direction from from the City Council. So I'll get into that in a moment. So the next step is that, over the months of October, November, staff developed the budget, and we just had a management retreat last week where we were starting to discuss priorities and what we needed to focus on for next year, what we need to wrap up this year, what we didn't finish in 2023. So it's really trying to narrow down what are the priorities going into 2023. And then we table the draft budget at the Finance and Admin Committee in November and take direction there, make any necessary changes, and table it to the board in December. Under the CA Act, there's prescribed rules that, the municipalities in the jurisdiction of the MVCA need to be circulated and given the opportunity to provide comment. Typically, we send out that letter with the draft budget before the holiday season and make an offer to make presentations to all of your councils in the month of January, if desired, or to meet with staff to review any of the details if there's any questions about it. And then ultimately it comes back to to the board in February for approval. But if at any time, during that process, we feel that there's a significant issue to be addressed, we also reserve the right and have on occasion called a finance committee meeting to look at things, to give it a final going over before it's tabled at the board in February. So as I mentioned, we typically take direction from the City of Ottawa. So we'd look to them to establish the growth assumption that the property tax is going to grow by just naturally by growth, as well as the operating budget. In recent years, since the board adopted a schedule of capital levy increases, and you may recall that when we developed the 10-year capital plan, we adopted at the same time this schedule that says if we're to afford this 10-year capital plan, here's how we need to be raising capital levies over time to be able to deliver on that capital program. So we had forecasted what those percentage increases would be for 10 years to accompany that 10-year capital plan. And then we look at the compensation budget increase based upon the Stats Canada cost of living, and we have a history of using the August rate. So that's the basis of how we approach the building of our annual budget. In recent years, we've also looked at the workforce plan adjustment. So the workforce plan was done in 2020-21 because we were having staff retention issues, and we are also having an incredible high degree of work associated with the housing boom. And so the board at that time approved investments in staffing and compensation and related matters, and that had been unbudgeted for and couldn't be afforded by member municipalities as a one-year increase. And therefore, it was agreed to pay for those increases on the operating reserve and to phase them onto the levy over time. So what you're seeing here is that we have been phasing it onto the levy. This year, the residual amount being paid by the operating reserve is just over $219,000. I'm offering, to give up one of those FTEs because quite frankly, I don't think it's required any longer. So that knocks that down almost by half. The job evaluation that we were just talking about poses a $15,000 pressure. So the net pressure on the operating reserve or the levy going into 2025 is just over 129,000. And we're proposing to phase 50% of that onto the levy this year and the balance onto the levy next year. So that 64,000, Mary Lou, is 2%. So you can see that of the levy increase. So 15,000 is, probably a 0.5%, something in that order. So overall, the recommended assumptions are then an assessment growth rate of 1.5%, an increase on the operating budget of 2.9 plus that growth, capital of 8.5 plus that growth. And again, that 8.5 comes from that schedule of capital increases, levy increases, a cost of living increase of 2%. And that would be accommodated, obviously, within that operating 2.9%. And then a transfer onto the levy of that 64,000 associated with the workforce plan. So this table here shows you the impact that it would have on your individual municipalities. And the one thing I want to flag is that every year we get those last two columns from the province, and it tells you what percentage your municipality is responsible for based upon assessment in your jurisdiction within the watershed. So the increases you see are affected by how your assessment value changes year over year. So some years you might go up, other years you might go down. So you can see that the city of Ottawa has gone down roughly 2% or so, or 0.2%, and others have gone up, et cetera. And it's directly tied to growth in your municipality. And these are numbers provided by the province. We have no say over that. So that's the end of my presentation on how we arrive at the, the draft envelope that you're being asked to approve today.
Okay, questions for Sally? Don't be shy. Somebody must have a question. Mary Lou.
This might sound stupid, but I'm sorry. The assumptions are virtually all assumptions on revenue. Correct?
Sorry, could you say that again?
The assumptions that we're operating under are assumptions made on revenue or revenue change. So your job from this point on is to fit the needs of the organization into those numbers.
Yes, that's correct. We refer to it as the funding envelope. We need to work within that envelope.
That's a nice euphemism. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, I will read the resolution. Resolved that the Board of Directors directs staff to develop the 2025 budget and related documents in accordance with the following parameters. 1, an increase of 2.9% plus assessment growth to the operating levy. 2, an increase of 8.5 plus assessment growth to the capital levy. 3, an assumed assessment growth rate of 1.5%. 4, a cost of living increase to the 2024 pay scale of 25 pay scale, yes, of 2%, and transfer $64,664 into the municipal levy for workforce plan adjustments. Could I have someone move that? Okay, moved by Dina, seconded by Glenn. Okay. Any questions? No? All in favor? It is carried. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, our next item is the draft land conservation and resource strategy report that Sally's going to provide us.
Okay, so this has been a long process that we've been involved with quite literally since we got our new legislation in 2019. And then especially since 2021 when OREG 686 of 21 came out. And it basically told conservation authorities that the province wanted conservation authorities to be far more transparent in its business planning, the work that it was doing, setting priorities, setting goals and objectives, consulting with the community and its municipalities and what it was doing, how it was doing it, where it was doing it. So, you know, those of you who've been around since 2019 will recall any number of documents that we've brought forward to lend transparency to the work that we do and put forward business cases. And then ultimately, many of those, the outcomes of those works came to your councils in support of the Category 2 and 3 agreements that you signed on last year, for which, again, as Marissa said, thank you, because it's wonderful to be able to deliver those programs in the jurisdiction. So after completing all those studies, it was really important to draw all that information together and try to develop a document that tried to encapsulate all of this. And the legislation, the regulations were very prescriptive on what this document had to address. And so that's why we prepared that current state report and the discussion paper back in July that you'll recall we issued to the public and started to get feedback on, because we can tell people what we're doing today and what's, you know, in the works. But what this document is really asking us to do is look ahead 10, 15, 20 years. Where do we want to go? Because one of the big questions to be answered has to do with land acquisition. And what are we going to, you know, are we in the land acquisition business? If so, for what? And those are long-term decisions. You can't develop just a short-term strategy around. So we did get excellent feedback on it, as well as a rec study that I'll talk to you a little bit more about. But now what you have in front of you is the draft document. It's actually two documents in one. They wanted a conservation area strategy and they wanted a watershed-based resource management strategy. So I've combined them together because that worked for me, and it's not prohibited, one document rather than two. And it's called the Land Conservation Resource Strategy. And the goal of today is to have it in front of you because we're going out to the public with it. And I wanted to make sure that you were familiar with this document, at least at a high level, before we go full on with our consultation plan. So the consultation will happen over this month and next, and with the goal that we come back to you with the final document in December for approval. And the regulation requires that this has to be completed by the end of this year. So some of the mandatory elements I wanted to highlight to you is absolutely it has to have policies around acquisition, disposal, who's going to pay for those lands, what programs and services will be offered on those lands. As well, it asks how CA lands augment any natural heritage in its jurisdiction and how they integrate with other provincially or municipally owned lands. So this is why some of you may have seen the survey that we did on recreational land in our jurisdiction. We really needed to canvass and understand what is out there today and how does our properties integrate with that. You'll see under the watershed-based resource management strategy that, you know, those are the items that the province absolutely wanted to see in this document, and we check all those boxes. So the two key consultation tools that we used were the discussion paper regarding our current state and what we do today, with a focus on the natural heritage in terms of Do people think, you know, we should be buying land? And if so, for what purposes? Do people think we should be, you know, continuing to operate the museum? And if so, how? And then the second survey was the rec survey I mentioned. So you can see we got respectable number of responses. I'm actually pleased with 84 responses on the discussion paper. It's kind of an esoteric kind of topic to go out to the public on, and the fact that we got 84 responses I thought was pretty good. I was quite pleased with the 198 responses we got on the recreation facility survey. And these are all in your agenda package if you have time, and I recognize you likely don't, but they were very informative surveys to be conducted. The one qualifier I will say, though, is that they're self-identified responses, meaning this is not a, you know, Stratos or whoever kind of survey where it's, you know, 93% accurate, you know, plus or minus 5% kind of thing. This is us putting out on social media, hey, we're doing a survey, and people deciding, sure, I'll participate. So, you know, as the GM writing this document, I recognize that it's a very discreet kind of person who's responding to this survey, okay? One of the things I thought was very helpful, though, is in the recreation survey, amongst many questions we asked, you know, what are your top 3 sites that you go to, and what do you most appreciate about those sites? And when I look at the list that people came back to us with, it very much aligns with what we offer in terms of our conservation areas. Most of them want to be able to drive to the site in 30 minutes, easy parking, quiet, secluded, private, you know, site, variety of trails, routes, differences and distances and terrain, water, wildlife, lookouts, and dogs on leash. And I think that is our niche. So one of my key messages to you here today is I do think that's our niche. If we can offer that to people in the watershed, I think we're doing well. So the document breaks down all our programs and services according to the new categories. So hazard management, land and resource conservation, source water protection, and then other services. And the thing I want to flag for you is that other services includes education. And if you have the time to read the document, you'll note that education and outreach is something we need to be doing as a Category 1 service under hazard management, land and resource conservation, and source water protection. So that's why under other services, you're seeing Cat 1 and 3, because as we design our education and outreach program going forward, we need to do a better job of making sure we're communicating out on those Category 1 focused issues and matters. So I'm going to just breeze through this very lengthy document to flag certain things I want to make sure you're aware of. And if there's the opportunity, if people are interested, we can talk about these things, but I am cognizant this is a lot of material to plow through. So under hazard management, sorry, I'll just flip up here. There's three programs that we offer: the flood forecasting and warning, the mapping and regulation, and then the assets and operations. So all CAs in the province do the flood forecasting and warning. Most of them, where they're flooding and other hazards, are doing mapping and administering some sort of permitting system. But not everybody has assets and operational requirements like MVCA. Not all CAs have dams and weirs and the like that they're operating. So that is definitely specific to us. So for all these program areas, I've identified like 1 or 2 key goals and a set of objectives. And these are very high level corporate type of goals and objectives, but I do use them in part to flag areas where we need improvement. So on this area under flood forecasting and warning, I think we need to really work with your municipalities more in terms of making sure there's that readiness for emergency planning every year, as well as I think as we move forward collectively, we need to be thinking about drought response more. As I mentioned, I think we need to do a lot more work getting residents in particular to understand how the watershed functions, those systemic risks and what they can do, and also our role in that. And then we need to track our customer service interactions with members of the public more frequently so that we can do better analytics on the type of calls we're getting on what issues are there systemic issues we need to be either communicating out on or addressing. Under mapping and regulations, there is a new regulatory requirement that they are updated annually. So what this means is that we'll be coming back to this board every year and just notifying you of any amendments that were made over the course of the year through the permitting process and get them officially loaded up to our webpage. We need to really work on historical data because you would like to, think that you could pull up a person's history on that property and know what the history was. But right now, we have a lot of things still in file boxes under the stairs, quite literally, and we need to address that so that as properties change hands and as people in this building change over, that we retain that corporate knowledge within the organization and can access it readily. One of the other issues that we've been challenged with, and all CAs have been, as well as yourselves, in fact, are the constantly changing regulations and changes in powers that have impacted not only ourselves, but your municipal planning groups as well, in terms of what is and isn't in scope for CAs to administer. And so it's a constant effort to make sure our guidelines are up to date with these changes that are coming down the pipe. So lastly, under hazard management, under assets and operations, the things I wanted to flag is that, and we did touch on this during the budget discussion, is we have a 10-year capital plan. We do have that schedule of capital levy increases that allow us to deliver on that capital plan. What we don't have, and I just flagged this, it's not a criticism, it's a state, I think, of all of our organizations right now, but we are not putting money ahead for the next 10 years. We are only ever putting aside money for this 10-year period, which means we're not developing our capital reserves to the degree that we probably do for long-term replacement of major assets. We are only able to deal with the next 10 years. And that's what that 8.5% looked like, right? On the capital levy was just this 10-year period. So there is a infrastructure gap, a funding gap that over time we're going to have to address. The other thing I wanted to flag is that right now we do operate M&R and OPG infrastructure. So it's 6 M&R facilities and 2 OPG facilities, and they pay us to operate their assets. And I think there's really good operational and system management reasons why we should continue to do that for those organizations. And therefore, I think it's really important that we demonstrate value for money to those 2 organizations and that we continue to be their operator of choice for their infrastructure. It's done at no cost to us. It, in fact, helps defray the cost to this organization that we would have to incur anyway. So the next category of programs that I want to review with you are the land and resource management. And this page just is overriding to all land because we own a variety of different types of properties. So something I'd flagged in July was that we really need to work on getting clear title and legal agreements regarding all the assets that we manage. So that we will be coming back with a work plan in 2025 because that's going to take time and resources to resolve. We need to have a board-approved plan for all of those lands. We don't right now. And we should. So we're going to prioritize that work to come back and make sure that the board is in agreement with how we should be using those lands and or if we should be disposing them. And then lastly, and this came up at the last board meeting, the influence and participation of First Nations is evident at all MVCA properties. And I did have a subsequent conversation with Roxanne on this. And we discussed the potential of at least starting with looking at signage and capturing the history of First Nations in this area and other things that we could discuss going forward. So, and she was, appreciative of that as a first step. Getting into specific types of land, then let's talking about conservation areas. So I'm being very specific with this goal. Conservation areas provide opportunities for walking, hiking, and solitude in a natural setting and contribute to the quality of life and sustainability of the watershed, and that they're accessible to all. And that is a fairly constrained definition of what a conservation area is when you consider the full gamut of what some CAs out there offer at their sites. And I am proposing that we keep a very narrow focus to our conservation areas. And this is something that I would, welcome feedback on. And I got that sense from many of you who replied to the surveys that I sent out to you. So some of the key things I'm flagging as objectives, it's aligned very much with those sort of top 9 characteristics that people were looking for. But added to that, you'll see 3D, provide at least one wheelchair accessible trail and comfort station at a conservation area. And this is a philosophical question, whether or not we should try to make all of our facilities have something that's accessible. And I'm suggesting I think it's a best practice and we should strive to that. The provincial legislation does make exception for trails, but I think that if we're striving for providing a particular kind of space that is increasingly difficult to find, that I think it's important for us to make sure that everybody can have accessibility to at least some part of that peace, serenity, nature. On the last point, the 3F, reserve at least 90% of the property as a natural area. This, again, that's how you accomplish that peace and serenity, but it's also how we would accomplish that protecting natural heritage values within the watershed. The number 4 and number 5, I want to explain because I use the term conservation area type park. And I use that term specifically because in assessing this metric, and I'm suggesting that everybody have access within a 30-minute drive of their home, that we're not just looking at conservation areas owned by MVCA. It could be any open parkland that has the attributes that we have set for ourselves as a conservation area. So, I live in Stittsville. I have access to the green belt. I have access to pathways, outside of Stittsville. None of them are owned by the Conservation Authority, except when we get to the Carp River Conservation Area owned by the city. And then I think we would want to have a conversation about, okay, in its current state, does it actually meet those criteria? But the objective would be to looking across our watershed, is this a metric that we could strive for? And again, this is a 10 to 20-year plan. It's not suggesting we would go out tomorrow and say, where are the gaps and let's fill them tomorrow. These are the objectives we would strive for. So similarly, under 15, that 15 hectares of conservation area type parkland be available for every 1,000 residents. And so this is, ties to the analysis we did in the REC survey, looking at across our jurisdiction, what, trails and pathways and camping and other sorts of sites are there out there, and where do we find ourselves today? So the other one I wanted to flag was 6B, which is the maintenance of walking, hiking trails in the watershed. So we have a base amount of vehicles and employees that we have on staff because we operate conservation areas and because we operate dams. And to the extent that your municipalities or, other organizations delivering comparable services may wish to use our services, I'm suggesting that we do so on a cost recovery basis because those properties are helping us meet those objectives. So rather than necessarily investing in our own properties, maybe we're investing in helping others operate theirs. The next category of land I've termed conservation preserves, and this actually relates to a host of different properties. So the first one is 1A there, sterilized undevelopable land. So you might recall that I spoke to you about the properties, I think there's about 15 to 20 of them on the Clyde River that were expropriated back in the 90s by the Conservation Authority when there was federal money to buy out people who were consistently flooding. So that's one way in which a land might be considered a conservation preserve. Another area might be like we have in Appleton, which is to manage an area of natural heritage on behalf of a third party. So we manage that Appleton wetland property under an agreement with Ontario Heritage Trust. Then we have mitigate the impacts of land development elsewhere in the watershed. And what I'm referring to here is you may recall last year, either last year or earlier this year, you approved offsetting policies. And what those offsetting policies do is allow developers the opportunity, if no other options are available, to develop on wetland, but then to do offsetting planting and habitat restoration elsewhere in our jurisdiction. And I have been having conversations with the city on this because that's where most of these situations occur. And the implicit assumption in this is that there's land to do this on. And land is not easy to come by in the city of Ottawa or in the outskirts in, highly developed areas. So where exactly is this offsetting work to occur is the question that a lot of us are asking. So one of the things I've been in discussion with the city staff about is maybe we pre-identify parcels of land that either the city has acquired through various means, it comes across land, or that the CA does, and that we tell developers, you will do your offsetting project here because we've already identified this site as a viable site where habitat restoration is appropriate and necessary, et cetera. Nothing has been done in that regard. It's all just talk right now, but I've put this as a placeholder under this heading as why we might have land for that purpose. And I just wanted to make sure you're understanding the intent behind that. Then the last category under this is protect or develop natural carbon sinks using GHG reduction funding mechanisms. Some CAs are in the GHG offsetting business and they're making money on it. I don't know how they're doing it, but they're doing it. And I thought, well, I'll just put this as a placeholder. And if I can figure out how they're making money off of it, and I see it as a business opportunity for our CA, then I can come back to you if this is a placeholder in our policy framework. I'm going to stop there because I've been talking probably for 20 minutes because I have another set of slides to get to after this. But are there any questions people have at this point?
Any questions, Janet?
Yeah, I spent a long time reading this over a couple of days, and it is a monumental piece of work, and I congratulate you on it. And while I agree with, obviously all the sentiments in it, I am a little concerned that MVCA might be going outside its mandate with some of this land acquisition and greenhouse gas stuff, okay? And I know we have these conservation areas now, and that's fine, and I have no issue with the goals for them and the accessibility and so on. But I don't think it's our job to fill recreation gaps. And I mean, I said this in their survey. I don't think it's our fill recreation gaps to meet those metrics that you put in about 30 minutes, and they're all wonderful metrics, but that's not our job. And so I am a bit worried that we may be going up by putting these policies in place. We're setting expectations among others that we will go out and acquire property or accept donated properties and all the other things. And I guess the other thing is, because I sat on a land trust board for 3 years, but one of the ones in our watershed, and have worked closely with Ducks Unlimited Canada, those two organizations are much better set up to acquire and manage land for conservation purposes. And I know that one of the land trust has a policy for making their land, many of their lands open for people to recreate on. So I don't have a way of trying to modify these words right now, but I have a concern that this goes out for draft consultation, setting expectations. And I personally, as a board member, am a little worried about what we're trying to bite off as an organization, as much as I support the spirit behind them. Thank you.
Sally?
I'll just, so the term I came up with was conservation area type. And I know it's not perfect and it will probably need a definition somewhere. But I want the board to know, I'm not assuming it's our land. And the challenge I ran into with this is that the regulation says I have to look at all of your assets and figure out, you know, what the need is and how we're addressing, maybe I won't say the gap, but how we fit in. And we consulted with all your municipalities to see if any of you were doing similar analysis. And we consulted the counties, and none of you and none of the counties are doing this level of analysis. It's at a scale that you are not looking at. So only the CA is looking at this scale in our jurisdiction. Nobody else is. So that's why I flag it as an issue, because it is, the demand is increasing. If you look at the rec study, you will see the metrics are through the roof in terms of where they used to be 40 years ago and where they are today. The intensity of use has increased dramatically at a rate far outpacing the increase in the resources. And I'm sure you guys know that yourselves anyway from your own local recreational studies, right? So we're seeing it at the macro level as well. And that's what this document is addressing. I agree with you. It could create expectations, but that's why I used that terminology, and it's not perfect.
And I think, Janet, you've hit a point, but again, it's not binding this board to start going out and buying property or something. It's not binding future boards. It's worded such that it says, here's things to consider, but at the whim of the province may come out and change what the conservation authorities do and say, you have to purchase all this land, you know, and we're going to put it on the conservation authorities at any given moment. So I don't think it binds us in any way, though I recognize that some people might take it that way, literally, why aren't you doing this? Instead of saying, no, this was particularly with that wording of whatever the conservation area type. I think it leaves us the availability to interpret going forward, and it's not binding.
Quick follow-up, and I get all that, and I knew that when I, read it. Well, of course, everything has to come to the board, but there's still a lot of staff work that potentially could happen. But in any case, to me, this could get passed and everything, but the way to approach it is to work with those organizations that are currently set up, right? And I know, again, the land trust had a prioritized areas that they wanted to, address. And I know Ducks Unlimited Canada is extremely strategic, and I know you know that because you work with them. And maybe the counties and the townships and everything may not be looking at this from a watershed perspective, but I'm pretty sure those other guys are. So that would be a more acceptable way of approaching it, at least to me. Anyway, so again, I think it's a monumental work. I really think it's excellent. But just be careful in the future. Thank you.
Noted. Bev.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you about that. I get, we're almost taking on too much, and I think we talked a little bit about that at our meetings previously. But so I'm wondering if there should be something in there, a little introduction that says, we're not necessarily going to do this, but we welcome partnerships, or just something to make it clear. Because I'll tell you, if this goes out like this, there's going to be a group of people who are going to think we're going to do all that, and they're the noisemakers, and we don't need that any more of that.
Okay, I'll take that direction and make sure that that verbiage is inserted into the next iteration.
Perhaps a definition of what the conservation area types are and say that these could include, you know, things operated by Ducks Unlimited, blah, 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 the Land Trust and other organizations who do it similar, and they would meet the terms of this. This is not necessarily just the Conservation Authority. Richard?
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I just, like maybe something saying that where opportunity and finances come together to do it, but as said, you can say what you want at the front, they're going to jump to the other. And I always try to not create issues. And this could create issues on both sides. People thinking you're going too far and people thinking, let's jump. Yeah, we should be doing this right now, today. And so there is going to be reaction on both ways. And it's going to create issues. So I think the more we can say that, you know, as budget presents itself as because, you know, there could be an opportunity and then it fits into this. But as opportunities and budget present itself, I think is a good thing to say right at the beginning.
Okay, I'll definitely make those amendments in the executive summary then to be very clear on that. And I'm just curious, because 6B here speaks to us basically supporting those organizations. Should I be equally saying that then, that not only, you know, are we looking to others to help and potentially lead that role, but that we could support them potentially in an operational sense? Or is that a bridge too far?
Bev? And then Mary Lou.
The only problem is with that is, you know, we're pretty bare bones, and as I looked at all the reds in our asset management and you know, dams and whatnot needs to be repaired. We don't have a lot of extra money to support, and that includes staff time. So I'd be very careful with that, Sally.
Okay, thank you.
Could be done on a cost recovery basis, though. And that would be something that would offset some of the stuff. I know with cost recovery, I've been talking a little bit about one trail that we've created. So Mary Lou and then Janet.
Well, I think under 6B, part of the problem lies strictly with the word supporting. In one sense, it's very vague. In the other, it has got very strong implications or connotations of we are supporting, i.e. we will do it for you. And so perhaps if it were replaced by with opportunities to cooperate with or to partner with, which it's a term I hate, but at the very least, it makes it was on, and then it seemed to go off. Sorry.
Okay, so I'll look at modifying 6B for the next version that gets issued. We do in the schedule of fees coming later in this board meeting, we have put a placeholder amount for cost recovery on those kind of services.
Janet?
Yeah, I had actually made a note because I'm going to send out a few editorials later, but to actually add the words on a cost recovery basis to 6B, because then whether it has the word support or cooperate with or whatever, then it makes it clear you're only going to do it. We're only going to do it if it makes financial sense for us to do it.
Okay, super. I'm just going to see if there's anybody online who has a question. Did we? Oh, you can see them? Okay. Okay. Mary Lou, did you have something else you wanted to add or no?
Try this. Okay, objectives, 1A, sterilize undevelopable land. What in the world does sterilize mean in this context?
So those are lands that were expropriated in the 1990s using federal funding. Those lands were regularly flooded. And so the landowners were bought out and their cottages torn down. And so for all intents and purposes, they lie within the floodplain. When we bought them out, we did so because under our regulations, conceivably, somebody could tear down one of those cottages and build a new one. Anyway, you know, our regulations allow for some replacement within certain limits. But by buying those lands, we effectively sterilize them from development. That program hasn't been in place for decades now, and no federal government is buying out people. So it's kind of a grandfathered program.
Historically, it was Cedar Dale along the Clyde River. And I have pictures of my uncle canoeing through his living room. So, and that was kind of every second year that happened. So basically, they came in and said, you people have to move. They raised a thing, well, give us money. And the program came forward, but it doesn't exist anymore. So it's just a legacy. Yes, Janet.
Sorry, just, but I had the same question. I think sterilize, I kept thinking isopropyl alcohol or something. I honestly, I just think it has a meaning to you, but not a meaning to most people who would read it. So you might wish to consider another verb. Anyway, there's only one other comment that I wanted to raise in this meeting. I do have a few editorials, but there's a comment that says land ownership and management are used as tools for reconciliation with First Nations. And I found that a very, a hard way of saying it. Like rather than saying land ownership and management are used as tools, are places where, I don't know, the authority can come together for reconciliation with, so you know what I'm saying? If you could come up with better words than tools, like it just like, we're going to wield it and reconcile with you, you know? So it's just a hard way of saying it. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll try to address all those concerns with the next version that gets out. So it'll be V3. Okay, I'm going to continue on then. Now we are dealing with the water and erosion control infrastructure sites. So these objectives, I mean, the biggest one that we're trying to address is the unfettered legal access that I already mentioned. There's nothing in particular I wanted to raise about that in terms of our dam sites and the like. Under source water protection, similarly, I mean, I think we're doing a really good job both for the province and for your municipalities. The main thing I just wanted to say is under Objective 4 that we are leveraging the work we do for the province to support the work we're doing for you under the Category 2 programs and services, which allows us to deliver a lot of programs in your municipality that help to inform planning decisions and the like. On to the education outreach, and you're going to hear a bit more about this later in the meeting from Scott, that watershed residents and users understand how the watershed functions and their role and MVCA's role in it. And I want to flag that it was the P&P committee that said it should also say an MVCA's role. So that will be included in the next version. But the main thing is that it needs to be locally relevant, useful, and accessible information targeted by audience and location. And by this, I mean that somebody in Sharbot Lake is not getting the same information as somebody in Carleton Place or somebody on Dalhousie Lake. That your perception of the watershed and the issues you're addressing, some are shared, but a lot of them are unique to where you are in the watershed. And so we really want to try to tailor the messaging to where people are approaching it from. On stewardship, you heard that presentation earlier. I don't have anything more to say. The objectives speak to the range of programs that we're offering, and they're all delivered in accordance with that Category 3 agreement we have with your municipalities. And so lastly, under visitor services, which is just strictly the services we deliver at the Milliken Tail, there's two key goals: sustainable management of the property and buildings for current and future generations. And that speaks to the fact that there are heritage structures that represent a lot of history in the county of Lanark and to the residents in the immediate area. And as well, it is a top 10 destination in Lanark County, and we want it to continue to be. The key issue that we need to grapple with here, of course, is the future of the museum. It's not necessarily, addressed here, but in this particular section that I have here, but it is something that we need to think about. I'm recommending that we do transition it to an organization that's has the expertise in that sort of cultural management. With respect to next steps, we are putting out public notices. It'll be circulated to your municipalities. We're having a virtual open house. And over the month of November, as we receive comments, I'll be reviewing them and updating this. And Janet, and if anybody else have editorial comments, please feel free to send them along, and I can address them. Ultimately, this needs to come back to the board at the December meeting because it needs board approval by the end of the year. So I don't know if there's any other questions. That was kind of a sprint to the end on that.
Yeah. Any other questions in that last section? Okay. I just want to say too, and sort of what Janet had said earlier is, I think that the team here at MVCA has done a lot of work on this. And I do believe that we have the right people in place in this organization now to be able to take this through and get it to where it needs to be at the end of the day. And it'll be something that will guide future boards for a long time. Anyways, so seeing no more questions, the motion is be resolved that the Board of Directors receive the draft land conservation and resource management strategy. Could I hit someone to move that? Moved by Bev, seconded by Roy. All those in favor? Carried. That's right.
Just one quick question. When you write this, do you write this or do you have a professional writer to help you with this?
Me.
Okay, item number 8 is the education program review. And Scott, you're leading us through that.
For those online, Scott's just pulling up his presentation.
I think we've got it. Good afternoon, everyone. So as we say, I'm going to take you through an overview of the proposed education program and the program review document that was done. Can't get it to move.
There we go.
So previously, the board had directed staff to complete an analysis report that would look at the possible reinstatement of the programs, the educational programs that were previously halted at the end of 2019, going into 2020 due to COVID. So we're happy to announce that we were able to finally secure that document. It was a longer process, I think, than we initially had thought, but we did contract the services of Bill Elgie, who he was a retired teacher and former director of an outdoor education program himself. So a bit of an overview of what we asked Bill to do and what he was able to complete. So he did a fairly extensive interview process with comparable organizations, CAs, in terms of their size to us and what education programs they're offering and how they're able to offer them. He did speak to past participants from files that we've had, both reaching out to them and through a survey process. School board contacts, teachers, again, through a survey, other outdoor ed centers within our geographic location and within the area of our watershed. He also completed a review of our properties, looking at it from the ability to facilitate outdoor education program at those properties. And he did go into a list of potential partners. So we did ask him to come up with short-term, midterm, and long-term recommendations based on his findings. And so this is I guess a focus on what we were calling the short term. So if we looked at this year, he did make the recommendation to offer programs during May and June. Most of that was focused around field trips and school visits. So field trips more or less at the Mill of Kintail property, very similar to what would have been done in the past. May and June is obviously the busier season for a lot of those field trips for those potential classes. And then the report does go on to talk about the mid and long-term recommendations being based around program development and growth of those programs. So with that, as staff, we've developed a 2025 program plan that involves some of the recommendations that Bill had put forth, as well as some other programs to help kind of facilitate a full education program for MVCA. So it does look at reintroducing those school programming, so both the field trips and the class visits. A new kind of idea that we did come up with would be the guided tours of our 3 flagship conservation areas. PA day camps or PD day camps, whatever the day is called now. Also the institution of a March break camp. And then we're also looking at extending our successful summer camp program into a 7-week program from the 4 weeks that took place this year. So based on an initial analysis and a budget, on the left-hand side, you can see how the program is structured. So it's structured based on 1 full-time position. This is really, it's what we feel is a realistic and obtainable budget from the standpoint of both a pricing structure for our programs and the actual target of what we're aiming for a first-year program. So having been involved in program development, you can either be the best or you can be the biggest. It's really hard to be both. So especially in a first-year program, we're trying to really focus on the fact of reasonable and obtainable goals that will allow us to develop the best programs without being stressed about trying to reach a number that, is really pushing the limits of what we're capable of for a first-year program. For instance, so you can see there were 37 school trips done to the Mill of Kintail in 2019 before the program ended. We're looking at a goal of 12. Similarly, they did 15 to 20 school visits. We're going to target 8. It doesn't mean once we reach that target that we're done, we can put our feet up, but that is more or less that is our goal to make this program successful. And based on the numbers of what we've run in the past and the inquiries that we've gotten since I've taken over the position, we feel that a lot of these goals are definitely realistic and obtainable from our perspective. So as said, it'll really allow us to focus on the quality of the program. We really want MVCA to be the go-to organization for nature-based and outdoor education, within our watershed and within our geographic area. Excuse me. Similarly, there's a major focus on the summer day camp program. So the previous version was 20 kids over 6 weeks. That ended again in 2019. This year we did 32 kids over 4 weeks. We did have excess demand. So our plan for this coming year would be 44 kids over 7 weeks. So it'd be a similar growth pattern. So we've already increased it from 12 participants per week. We're going to plan on another 12 participants per week. And again, based on the excess demand that was available and the fact that we were getting inquiries to be able to run more weeks this year than we had initially planned, we feel this is an obtainable goal. And again, based on how the summer camps are structured to run, they will be 100% cost recoverable this year. And it would also go, if you notice how the revenue line item for the summer camps at almost $78,000, it represents approximately 67% of the expenditures of the overall program. So the summer camp program can be a real cornerstone program for us to be able to facilitate the overall education program, and it can really go a long way to help support the program in the long run. So with that, I know it was fairly quick, but that's kind of our view for what we can see based on, like I say, based on the recommendations that came from Bill's report and what we would like to see as staff moving into 2025 and hopefully the first year of starting to revise this program.
Any questions for Scott? Bev?
Thank you. Thank you, Scott. I do have 2 questions for you. The field trips you're planning, are you also going to involve the actual museum and the 2 gentlemen in there and their importance to conservation and history and whatnot?
Yeah, so we're looking at, we haven't fully developed the actual field trip plan yet, but I think we'd be foolish not to include that portion. So initial looks has us tailoring a 2.5-hour visit and then a 4 to 4.5-hour visit. And I think part of the program, to make the program successful, I think we would need to look and work with the teachers in some aspects of what they would want to see for what we can offer and then what they want to see for particular trips. But I do think we would like to incorporate that part into it.
Yeah, I think a little bit of education as you're trying to find out what they want to incorporate it, because as someone who sometimes serves tea down at the Milliken Tail, there are people who come there who don't even realize that there's a museum there. Like they know it's a Milliken Tail, but they have no idea that that stone building actually contains a lot of history. My second question is, you're talking about an additional 1 FTE. Is that a permanent FTE? Is that a part-time, a temporary?
Well, at this point, based on the program, we would like it to be at least a full year contract position.
Okay. And we have funding for that, or?
Well, so the real funding to support this program comes at this point from the $20,000 that has been set aside in the Category 3 MOUs. The long-term goal of this program is to have the education program's full cost recovery independent by the end of the 4th term. So at that point, the hope would be that all of the revenue that is generated through the user fees in the program would make the program completely self-sustainable, including that FTE position.
So that 20,000 would go towards part-time, towards some of that salary, because you're not going to hire a full-time for 20,000, right?
No, and that's if you look back to where the budget sits now. So everything in the expenditures line at the top is the full program, the FTE included. And then once you get into the revenues generated from the programs below, it's kind of how the offset. It's the whole program revenues offsetting the expenditures to the entire program. So you can see the last line in the revenues. It equates to the $20,000 that's set aside in the Category 3 side. So the end result of what we'd like to see from this program is by the end of the 4th year that we don't need that $20,000 anymore, that it's a completely self-sustained program. And I don't think we're getting ahead of ourselves just based on the feedback and the results from the summer camps this year and the demand that seems to be in the watershed to be able to bring back some of these activities. And then it's about being, new and proactive and creating new activities that we haven't done before. So actually something that I failed to bring up in the original presentation is we're looking to step outside of the children and go to the adult side things too. So getting into the retirement homes and getting into the adult programs that we're able to, again, expand our market that we're able to capture. So it's, we still have a little bit more to flush out in terms of the overall project, but I think we're well on our way.
Thank you.
Richard?
I'm sorry, I wasn't here when you discussed the summer camp a couple of meetings ago, but does the summer camp pay rent for we charge ourselves an internal rent for the property for the summer camp, or is it, what are the costs that we're recovering? Just the labor, or what is it?
Yeah, most of the costs that are, and I know what you're referring to in terms of charging yourself a facility cost. We haven't quite got to that portion within the budget yet. It is an avenue we can look to go down, but at this point, the major cost being recovered out of the summer camp program is labor related. So whether it be the full-time coordinator, at this point, it was a contract position, a four-month contract position, and a big portion of that is also the support staff labor that's in there, and then you fill that out with some equipment purchases and whatnot. So we had to make some investment in equipment to kind of bring that inventory back up to par for this year. So that'll be lessened on future budgets, but those are the kind of investments and expenses we were looking at.
Okay. So basically, if I'm reading this right, you're anticipating that looking at that $20,000, you really only need 19,000 of it, and over the next 3 years, you're going to get rid of that $19,000.
That's the goal. So again, we're looking to grants and other revenue opportunities, but we're not trying to make that this program dependent on those, because we've seen how grants, if they don't come in, you're in pretty big trouble. So again, we're trying to be very conservative on the planning side, and I think that would be the goal.
Okay. Any other questions? Oh, Richard.
What do we charge per day for the camp?
So last year was $250. This year for a full week, and then I believe it's $200 for the one short week. This year we're planning to go up to $260 and $210. So within the program, we try and keep any sort of price increases usually between 3.5% and 7% based on the year.
You'd think we should be making more money at that. Are we hiring students or along with the?
So the summer camps themselves?
Yeah.
Well, we do, yeah. So we try and keep at least, at the very least, we'll shoot for an 8-to-1 ratio at the most. We'll try and, based on the program, it might go as low as 6-to-1. But yes, we do hire. It's not necessarily we're hiring students. It could be anybody that would be looking for a summer counselor position for the summer. But like I said, that's one of our bigger revenue costs in there too.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, resolve that the Board of Directors approve reinstatement of a nature education program in 2025. Do I have someone to move that? Moved by Jeff, seconded by Bev. All those in favor? It is carried. The next item on our agenda is the MVCA Asset Management Plan. Yuri? Okay, we are going to run a little bit over time today, so we'll be a little bit after 3 board members. Anybody have a problem with that? I'd like to certainly maintain quorum, so hopefully you can all stay. We'll shorten it up as quickly as we can, the next 2 items to get there. So,
I leave at 3.
okay. 9.
I have to leave as well at 3.
And I think that'll still keep us with quorum. Yeah. Goals note version.
All right. Good afternoon. So I know we're running a little late, so I'll do my best to go through this as quickly as I can. As you know, the OREC 686 outlined, among many other things, the requirement for the CH to develop and implement an asset management plan for the REC infrastructure by end of this year. So we developed our IMP plan considering, the following goals and objectives. I'm not going to read it for the sake of time, just wanted to say that really the idea we had in mind was to develop a transparent AMP system that would integrate, all the life cycle aspects of asset management according to established service levels, while maintaining, public safety and business continuity. So this asset management plan was attached to my board report, and basically you would see that this document is basically, again, 2 documents in one. So the first part is a high-level outline of MVCA AMP, goals, objectives, classes, registers, discusses, inspection procedures and planning, funding, and all that. And this is basically applicable to all our assets, right? So and it's also important to understand that before this document, there was no official formal approved AMP document at MVCA, right? So we kind of had to step back, look at all those individual policies and protocols and what was already in place and kind of formalize it in this document before we could actually look at some specific assets, right? And then the second part of the document then really looks at the water control infrastructure assets and goes more in depth and defines, the asset inventory, our system operation, system management, and the levels of service. And I will focus on those today. But before I start with the asset inventory, I also wanted to say that in the future, the plan is to add more chapters in this AMP for other MVCA assets, right? Like land, vehicles, buildings, and so forth, right? So for now, it's basically the water control structures because that's the requirement to have that in place by end of this year, okay? So the REC inventory, we have 24 water control structures within MVCA's jurisdiction, and half of them, 12, are owned and operated by MVCA. And then the other 8 structures are owned by others, but are operated by MVCA. So it's a total of 20 structures out of 24. There's only 4 structures that are owned and operated by someone else, right? By private hydropower facilities that are located downstream of Carleton Place, right? So this is important to understand. Basically, from Carleton Place upstream, the entire system is operated by MVCA, I think, which is really important. And then about half of these structures, 12 out of 24, are also incorporated into the Mississippi River Water Management Plan. And 6 of these are owned by MVCA. Now, in the AMP, I think there is a good summary of all our inventory, all our structures. There's like a page and a half for structure. It's a good reference, I think, place for future. And once you go through it, you will basically realize how diverse our portfolio is, right? And a couple examples here, we have Mazenah Lake Dam, which was built, I don't know, 30 years ago, and has all these latest engineering features incorporated. We see those energy dissipators installed. Versus, we have Kashwakama, which is like 15 years old, and with some serious structural deficiencies, right, in a need of replacement. And in terms of the value of the assets, there's also a large diversity, right? We have, dams like Pine Lake, which has a replacement value of several $1,000s versus, Carleton Place here in town, which the cost would go into $10-15 million, right? So that's kind of like that comparison. Now, in terms of the system operation, so I mentioned the Mississippi River Water Management Plan. Again, I'm not going to read through these objectives. There is, several objectives that we're taking into consideration when this plan was developed. Maybe, some of the most important is the public safety, obviously, and then the maintaining water levels for those different users, right? Whether it is for flood control, navigation, recreation, or hydropower production. And we also operate our system by considering, again, our requirement through the Rec 686 to mitigate, alleviate natural hazards. Now, those 2 examples are basically the operational plans that we follow as part of the water management plan. The upper figure is like typically applicable for all our dams and lakes, which is a very simple, basically, operation. We keep the lake levels constant in winter and in the summer. And then basically in the spring, the lakes are filled up with the freshet. And then in the fall, the lakes are drawn down. Now, the exception is Crouch, which we have a double cycle, right? And why is that? It's because, at the beginning of the winter, when we are now keep all the lakes in the watershed at constant levels with minimal outflow, the Crouch is drawing down and is providing the water for the system, maintaining the minimal flow. And the same thing is happening again in the summer. So the Crouch is at the maximum, and when we keep, the lake levels high, no outflow for the upper lakes, again, Crouch is maintaining the flows for the system. Now, in a few words about the system management. So I guess there are external and internal considerations here. The external considerations are entrenched in federal and provincial standards and guidelines for dam owners. So at the provincial level, we are talking about the Lakes and Rivers Improvement Act, which basically, establishes requirement for public safety, operation, maintenance, emergency preparedness, response. Also provides a classification of dams in the province and all that, and also guidelines for the typical infrastructure projects such as repairs, replacements, decommissionings, and so forth. And then on the federal level, it's more about, it's the CDA, Canadian Dam Association. These are mostly technical documents. And again, they basically address anything dam-related you can think of. There are technical bulletins for design and constructions of the safety booms, spillways, flow control equipment, and just like really dozens and dozens of very specific technical documents. Now, with respect to the internal considerations, I think one of the keys is obviously the function of our assets, right? Whether, the dams are providing any flood mitigation function or recreation or hydropower production. Then the other factor is condition and, of course, our resources, right, at MVCA. And so taking these considerations now and integrating them, we've developed, the levels of service for our WECI assets. And we have 3 categories, A, B, C, and these were defined considering 4 criteria. So one was, is there a reservoir? Basically, and how big is the reservoir? Is it a key reservoir for flood mitigation, or is it like a smaller storage lake that might provide some support? Or if there is no reservoir at all. The second one is dam operation. Not all our dams are operable. We have structures that are passive, flow controls like overflow weirs. They don't require any operation. And the third one is HPC, which is the hazard potential classification. And the last one is there a flood-prone area upstream or downstream of the dam, right? And so these were then, used to come up with these 3 categories. And we can think of basically A being kind of like it's like a level of importance, right? The level A structures are most important because they have important storage, they are operable, and there is some flood-prone area in the vicinity of these structures. So when we take this and we can classify our structures accordingly, and so we see that we have 4 structures classified as A, then we have, I think, 5 in the category of B, and we have 2 low category structures. And then we can take it even further and then start basically looking at, again, those external, internal considerations, factors. We can develop this matrix that tells us, how we can operate the structures, right? So there's like different things here, inspections, operations, studies like dam safety reviews, and so forth. And I guess, so throughout this process, as we are creating this AMP, we've identified a number of deficiencies and requirements. Will take us some time, to address and implement. So this AMP will take, some time to be fully implemented, of course. In the meantime, we'll continue identifying priorities and adding them to our corporate needs assessment, right? And from there, they will basically trickle down to our annual work plans and budgets and also our capital and infrastructure plans, right? The 10-year plan that we annually revisit and update. And I guess, so once this plan is implemented, we plan to periodically review the plan at least every 5 years to reflect any changes, whether it is an MVCA mandate, funding, budgets, changes in regulations, policies, or watershed changes, development and things like that. So I will leave it at that point, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Any questions? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to read the resolution. Be resolved that the Board of Directors approve the Assets Management Plan attached to the report 3450/24. Do I have a mover? Okay, second here. Janet, and I think it was Mary Lou over there. Okay. All in favor? Carried. Okay, our last
Okay, I'll make this fast, folks. Again, thank you for your patience today. It's a crazy agenda. Okay, so, oh no, that's the wrong one. Oh, darn. Stop sharing. Where did my budget one go to? I'm not going to try to get a PowerPoint because you guys want out of here. So I'm just going to speak to the item right out of the report. So the fee schedule is comprised of multiple schedules. There are those schedules that relate to, I'll call planning and regs related. Oh, yeah, sorry. Can I get that off of there? Can you get that off of there for me? I don't know why. Alex will try to get rid of that while I talk. So carrying on. The province, you may recall, for the past 2 years has imposed a freeze on our planning and regulations fees. So we're not tabling those today. The fees we're tabling with you today are non-planning and regulatory fees, and we will come back to you in December if we hear that the province isn't renewing that freeze on our other schedules. So we've done a review of all of our other fees. And generally, what we're proposing is that they go up somewhere between 4% and 7%. And you can see in the various schedules the dollars amount that we're recommending. I did want to flag for you on page 2, the fee schedules. We have the summer camp fees, as well as for the March break and the PA day camps, et cetera. And we also had staffing, sorry, on page 1, under conservation area use and type, it has staffing fee for rentals. Wait a minute, I'm going to have to ask Stacy, did we not put the, oh, I see it. It's on page 2, pardon me. So 2/3 of the way down, page 2 of the report, it says information and professional services. And under that, you'll see field crew, 2 staff plus mileage at $85 an hour. And I'm flagging that because that's that cost recovery for us to support other landowners in the delivery of conservation area type facilities management. So we're proposing that would be the cost recovery rate that we would charge our service delivery partners for that type of work. Other than that, there are no other new fees that we're proposing, just increases, and we're not proposing any increase to our day pass rates at this time. So happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Okay, seeing none. The motion is resolved that the Board of Directors approve Schedule D and E of the 2025 fee schedule as set out in Report 3452/24. Come on, Cindy, make a motion. Cindy, seconded. I got all sorts of people now. Roy. Okay, all those in favor? This is carried. Okay, our final motion. Allison, you still with us? You get to make this final motion if you get your hand up. Resolve that the Board of Directors meeting be adjourned. Allison. Thank you for staying. Oh, and Helen's up there too, right, Helen? Yeah, you can get your name in. Helen. I apologize if I ignored you at any time during the day. All those in favor? Carried. We're out of here.
Thank you, everybody. I know that was a brutal, long agenda.